Welcome. It's a great privilege for me to be moderating this panel with Charles Blow. Just quickly, I won't give you a lot about me, but just so you have some context, I'm a writer living here in Austin, and I have a book coming out next year called Exit Right about people who've gone from the left to the right of the political spectrum. And I'm also affiliated with the University of Texas at Austin in a variety of ways. But anyway, enough about me. Charles Blow, most of you probably know this, that's why you're here, is a New York Times columnist and CNN commentator. He's former graphics director of The Times and art director of National Geographic magazine. He's a graduate of Grambling State University, father of 3 amazing children. I'm taking your word for that, but
Yes,
I believe you.
they are amazing.
He's a resident of Brooklyn, and possibly, if you've read the book, maybe the only person in the history of the New York Times who just single-handedly convinced them to create a position entirely designed around his talents. Have you... The internship, right?
Yes. Well, yeah.
Has anybody followed you in that?
I don't know. I don't want to know, actually. I want to hold on to it as long as I can.
So before we just get to the question and answer, I just wanted to read you one kind of quote about the book from a writer who I admire a lot, so it's kind of meaningful. So this is Henry Louis Gates, who's a professor at Harvard. He says, "Fire Shut Up in My Bones is a profoundly moving memoir of Charles Blow's coming of age as a black boy in the Deep South, of the way his sensitive and gifted intelligence slowly begins to kindle, becoming ablaze with wonder at the world and his place in it. Above all, this is the story of a courageously honest man arriving at his decision to stop running like the river and just be the ocean, vast, deep, and exactly where it was always meant to be." So many of you have probably read the book. For those of you who haven't, that's an apt description. And I think we're going to start. Charles is just going to read a short passage from his book, and then we'll do Q&A, I think, for about 20 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So
Okay.
do you want to set it up? And
Sure,
then read?
sure. So Daniel and I just met. So he was just giving me some suggestions for what he thought I should read, and I thought they were great, and they were like very dynamic, and by hazing or trauma or guns, which I think are fantastic. Only I haven't read those when I've been reading. So when I get a chance to read, I read things that for me are more evocative of language and of growing up in the South and the way that I considered it. And I'm going to read a passage probably right after what Daniel suggested. It is the beginning of chapter 1, and I think it just says so much about the complicated web of family. It says a lot about poverty. It says a lot about pain and longing. And it also struck a point right out of the gate for the book about the fallibility of childhood memory, which I wanted to make sure that you understood that from the beginning, that I was investigating the memories themselves. So, the first memory I have in the world is of death and tears. That is how I would mark the beginning of my life, the way people mark the end of one. My family had gathered at Papa Joe's house because Ma'am Grace was slipping away, only I didn't register it that way. For some reason, I thought it was her birthday. Papa Joe was my great-grandfather. Ma'am Grace was his laid-up wife who passed the days in a hospital bed, squeezed into their former den, looking out through a large picture window that faced the street, watching the world she was leaving, literally passing her by. We were in the living room when he called to us. I think she's about to go. I didn't know what that meant. I thought it was time to give her a gift. With that, my family filed into her room, surrounding her with love. Their hearts were heavy. Mine, though, was light. I thought we were about to give her something special. They knew something special was about to be taken away. She peacefully drew her last breath as her head tilted and she fell still. No dramatic death rattle, no fear-tinged soliloquy, no last-minute confession. Like a raft pushed gently from the shore, she drifted quietly from now into forever. A beautiful life, beautifully surrendered. But I recorded it differently. I thought we she turned to see a gift that wasn't there, and that something went tragically wrong on the turning. When Ma'am Grace left the room, she took the air with her. No one could breathe. They could only scream. My mother was overcome. She ran from the house, and I ran behind her. She threw herself to the ground near the hog pen, wailing, her back rocking against it. I shooed the hogs away as they tried to lap at her hair. I was too young to know what it meant to die, but tears I knew. Sorrow flooded out of my mother like a dam had broken. It would be one, though, that she would soon rebuild, taller and stronger than it had been. As a child, I would never see her cry again. I spent most of my life believing my 3-year-old's version of what happened that day, until as an adult, I recounted my memory to my mother, and she set the story straight. Our gathering at Ma'am Grace's bedside was not to celebrate the day she was born, but to accept that it was her day to die.
I'll try to restrain my tabloid sensibility for the rest of the session. One of the passages that I had asked Charles possibly to read is about him getting hazed fairly violently in his fraternity at college. So I'll try and restrain this. My tabloid sense, I'll try and restrain that. Listen to that passage. It kind of brought something up for me, something so personal, which is just so the book is so obviously deeply personal, and it's also deeply vulnerable. You're talking about things in the book about childhood abuse, sort of complicated sexuality that most of us are not super comfortable having out there in the world.
Right.
And one of the questions I had is, what prompted you to write the book? Was there something that happened that you felt it was kind of time to open yourself up in this way?
Not even in the slightest. One year I was having drinks with editors of Essence magazines, and they knew that I was a single dad, and one of the editors says, well, you have to write something for our Father's Day issue. So I wrote this really short thing about, having to learn to do my daughter's hair, which I had no idea how to do that. And I thought to myself, I have a million stories from my life that I should just start to write down, and maybe I'll sell them to another magazine and they'll publish them as mini essays. I started to write. I didn't get around to selling. But part of it was just kind of an exhaling, wanting to see them written. One of the great lessons about writing is that people say, write the book you want to read. And I was just writing things that I wanted to read. But I guess the question is there a moment where it becomes something that that it's a book, that that you're going to write it as a book? And if there is a moment like that, for me it was in 2009. There were two 11-year-old boys. One was in Boston, his name was Carl, and one was in Georgia, his name was Jaheim. And they had both endured years of homophobic bullying. They were 11 years old, and within 10 days of each other, they both hanged themselves in their own homes. And I thought, but from two directions. From one direction, I thought, I know that pain. I know what it feels like to be bullied. I know what it feels like to entertain ideas of suicide. And it just can't be. It can't continue to be the same kind of pain in the world. And that maybe if I just write it, I will be able to explain what that feels like. The thing about really small children is they don't always have language to explain what they're, to express what they're feeling, to ask for help. And I thought, as an adult, I have that language. That is the one thing that I have. And the other thing is about small children, particularly those who commit suicide, sadly, is that they don't always even write suicide notes. So there's no way to even know what led them to that point. and I thought that the book, in a way, would be their suicide.